Thank you so much for joining us on the Dwellynn Show. I'm your host, Ola Dantes. I've got an incredible guest with us today, Kenneth Gee. Hey, Ken, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Doing fantastic. And we were talking about some pretty cool stuff before we hit recording here. But for our listeners who don't know who you are, can you kind of tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you've been doing lately, and kind of how you got started in real estate?
Sure. So I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, back in 1991, I think it was. Moved to Cleveland, so I got my undergraduate in finance from Toledo. Moved to Cleveland, got my master's in accountancy at a small private college called Case Western Reserve University. And then I went to work for Deloitte as a CPA for 7 years. Did a lot of merger and acquisition work. Did some state and local tax planning. It was a lot of fun. Interestingly, while I was getting my master's in accountancy at Case, I was working for a bank as a commercial lender. And all my customers kept telling me how much money they were making in real estate. Their business was doing great, but they really enjoyed the real estate part of it. And then as I left and went to Deloitte, the Cleveland office of Deloitte, they had a huge real estate tax practice. So sure enough, here I am again, finding myself surrounded by people who had done extremely well in real estate. And I said, you know what, enough of this. I need to do this. I was working really hard as a CPA. I don't know if you know much about CPAs, but they work really hard, especially during busy season. And I decided, you know what, it's time for me to make that jump from being an employee to being a business owner. So I dove in to apartments, and my first apartment building was a 28 unit apartment building in a little area of Cleveland called Shaker Square, and bought it 3 years later, sold it, made what at the time I thought was just an incomprehensible amount of money. And then just continued to, it was time for me to keep doing this because it was a lot of fun. It was, it's really fun growing something that it's yours. Now, fast forward to today, we're at about 50 employees. We're operating. We don't operate in Cleveland anymore, but we're all throughout Central and Northern Florida. And, we've managed thousands of units and owned 15 or 16 deals. And we just closed on our first formal blind pool private equity fund. So now we're out in the market deploying this capital for our investors.
I was just taking so many notes, but there's a lot going on here.
So sorry.
No, it's perfect. So let's kind of get into the world of an employee, right? Somebody listening to this isn't someone that has just closed on a blind pool equity fund, right? Most people listening to this show are people that maybe have a day job, looking to make that transition that you made, some years ago. So if I'm an employee and I'm listening to this podcast, I want to make that transition like you did. How did you literally make that transition, right? You were in Deloitte. You work with some, I guess, real estate investors at the time. You saw how much money they were making, and you were like, wait, these guys are probably not as smart as I am, or I could do what they're doing. And then you started doing some certain things that got you to your first 28 units. So what were those things that you did? So that's kind of like on the tactical side, but also the mindset, or how you were thinking at the time, play a role in helping you to make that transition?
Yeah, so that's really insightful question, because that what came first really was this desire that I wanted to change my mindset. And what I started to believe, because I just kept hearing it as much as I could, that you define, I have this saying, you are where you are because you choose to be there, right? I don't know if I stole it from somebody. I don't think I did. I think I created it, but I could be wrong. So if I didn't give credit to somebody, I apologize. But what I learned through this process is, wait a minute, I am where I am, but you know what? I need to change my mindset. I need to believe that I can go out and buy a 28 unit apartment building, because my upbringing I grew up in a small 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath house, about 800 square feet in Toledo, Ohio. I mean, there was nothing going on there. And so I said, all right, that's a jump from that being an employee to, okay, I'm going to do this on my own. So number one, you got to change your mind, right? You got to get your mind right. I'm sure you've heard that before, but it is the number one thing, because if you don't do that and you don't honestly believe it, the path to get from where you are to where you want to be is going to be hard. You're probably not going to have somebody holding your hand. You're going to be in charge of making your own decisions and doing it yourself. So you've got to rely on that belief and that drive. So then what I did was this is back when I think I was at Deloitte at the time. Maybe I was at the bank still. I can't recall now. But I spent about 1.5 years going to the apartment association meetings, taking their courses, making sure that I stayed after every time there was a seminar, and I talked to the speaker, and I formed relationships with those guys and gals. And I started to use them as mentors, because what happens after you've been doing something for a really long time, you get to know what you're doing, right? You understand it, and it actually becomes fun to help someone new in the business. And they gave me that lending hand. So, I met an attorney. I ended up being a partner with that attorney. I met another property manager who I would call from time to time for property management advice, and all these people. So I spent 1.5 years trying to learn the business, trying to put myself in a position where when I did pull the trigger, that I was somewhat ready, or at least I thought I was somewhat ready. And then I just started looking at deals. So I looked at deals and I just started underwriting them. And I thought, how do they know what these numbers are? And then you dive into each number and you figure out, oh my gosh, you can prove out every single number on this profit and loss statement except maintenance and repairs, basically. So I figured that out. And so now I got more confident as I started to underwrite deals. And then when I came across this deal, I don't remember, I think somebody referred me to this guy who happens to be a very large owner in the Cleveland area. But the first deal I did, I actually paid an attorney to sort of be my mentor, be that person that blesses the deal. And he went through everything. He looked at everything. He had been in this business a long time. He said, Ken, I think you're going to be good. I think you're going to make $100,000 in 3 years. I said, really? Okay. I said, wow. So now I had done my own homework. I didn't imagine $100,000 at the time, but I thought, okay, I can buy this. I think I understand how to run it. And now I've got someone with a lot of experience whose advice I just literally paid for, who said, yeah, I think you're going to be good with this thing. And as it turns out, we did more than that. So that was thrilling. But making that first jump is the most difficult thing you will do. I can, to this day, remember standing in my kitchen and this golf ball sized lump in my throat, because I was about to sign on a $460,000 mortgage, which at the time there was no way I was going to, that would bankrupt me in a minute. Okay. That was just a super stressful event. So, but nonetheless, remember when I said you've got to get your mind right, because you're going to go through those stressful events. And a lot of times those stressful events, they shut you down. You're like, nope, can't do this. I'm too nervous. I'm not going to do this. A lot of people quit at that point. And you just got to have this belief. I will tell you, there's good news. After your first deal and it starts to be successful, you start believing then that you know what you're doing. And that's when it becomes even more dangerous, because you think you know what you're doing because you did it once. So you just got to be even more careful on subsequent deals. But, that's kind of how I made that jump, right? You make it a little bit at a time. And all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, I just did it, right? You don't go from, today being one way and tomorrow being in that. I mean, this is a process that takes a couple of years. And I remember running that property while I still worked at Deloitte. And it was hard because I was working 80 hours a week. So, I had to figure out I got up at 5 a.m. to pay the bills and do things, so there's these levels of commitment that you have to go through. Now that's assuming that you want to actually get into the business and quit your day job and make this your life's work. That makes that assumption. Most people don't want to do that. Most people want to stay passive, and that makes sense for a lot of people. But for those who want to make that jump, that's the kind of commitment you need.
Fascinating. So still kind of going back chronologically. So you got this 28 units, right? Most people, at least our generation, the millennials, right? Kind of the idea is to house hack And I'm a big proponent of that. Is you buy like a small duplex or triplex or fourplex, and then you kind of walk your way. And that's kind of what I did until my last deal that I did, you know, a 178 unit 2 months ago. So it's kind of like that graduation process, but it looks like you skipped all of that. You went to this 28 units, right? So
Yep.
so I want to ask you, because I mean, please tell us the trick, Kenneth. How did you
I
do
will.
that? And kind of walk us through the story of that deal. I know you said you made a little bit more than $100,000, but just even if you don't want to talk numbers, but just kind of tell us a little bit more about that deal. And you mentioned it wasn't as easy as you thought. So, you know, I want you to kind of elaborate on that as well and give us a story about it.
Yeah, so I can dive into that deal for you. So a number of things. One, when we're all done here, I want to talk about a book that I wrote, and it's going to help your readers figure, or your listeners figure out how to figure out how this thing works for them. So when I started this process, every single person that wants to get into real estate goes through this process. Just like you described that you did it, I did it as well. But now I have to set up my life for you. And that is, I had a new son, fairly young infant. I had a good job at Deloitte, so I was working like a dog a lot. And now I'm trying to cram this other thing into my life. So I had a lot on my plate. I don't know how to fix things. I'm not a handyman. I mean, if you, one of my maintenance guys watched me try to put in a kitchen floor once, and after 8 hours, he threw me out and said, "Get out of here. I could have done this in an hour." Right. So I knew, you know, I have certain things to work with. I didn't have the manual labor skills. I didn't have the trade skills. I didn't have any of those kind of things. And I didn't have a lot of time. So in my mind, a single, a double, a fourplex didn't seem to be an option for me, because I couldn't see enough income there to be able to support paying someone else to do some of this work. So the 28 unit property that I had, there was a wonderful lady. Her name is Joyce. I won't use her last name. She's no longer with us, unfortunately, but she lived at the property, and she did this part-time. She was kind of retired. She loved where she lived. And she sort of was apartment buildings always say there's a mayor. There's always a mayor on every property. She was the property mayor. So she got to help me with the turn processes and showing apartments and collecting rents and do all that. So I was able to give her a unit and some small amount of money, but the 28 units worth of income was enough that allowed me to do that. So in my case, it was out of necessity that I needed to be able to have something that I could kind of run as a business, not as a single family home, right? Or a duplex. So that's what drove me to that 28 unit property. Now, and this is going to be a little bit of a long-winded story, but the biggest event that happened to me during this deal was I met a lady named Karen. I won't use her last name. She was from an office in the city of Shaker Heights called the Pro Integrative Housing Service. So the job of that office was to integrate neighborhoods, which is great. That's wonderful. The very noble cause, right? But so I met her. I don't remember how I met her, probably at one of the seminars that for the apartment association. And she said, "Ken, my challenge was, as soon as I bought this property, the applications that Joyce would send me weren't very good. They had bad credit. They didn't seem to make a lot of money." And I thought, oh boy, this is good. This is not good, right? And then Karen said to me, "Ken, if you build it, they will come." I said, "What do you mean?" So she met me at the property, and she said to me, she said, "Ken, what you need to do is go invest about $5,000 into this unit, make the kitchen nice, clean up the hardwood floors, blah, 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 do all these things, build it, they will come." I said, "Karen, are you kidding me? I just spent every penny I had to buy the thing. Now you want me to spend $5,000? Like, are you nuts?" She says, "Listen, I'm telling you, you got to do it. You got to figure out a way to do it." So I said, "All right." So I used my credit card, like every person shouldn't do, but I did. And I spent the money. And lo and behold, my rents were $479 before, and I got bad applications. As soon as I did that, my rents were $599, and all of a sudden, good people applied. So I learned that valuable lesson. Now, that whole business model is a value add business model, right? You go in, you add value. That's what she taught me, right? So this wonderful day. That's why I always tell people, you never know when this life-changing advice is going to come to you, and you never know who it's going to come from. And this woman changed my life, and to this day I owe it. I haven't talked to her in many, many, many years, but she helped me understand what needed to happen. And then all I needed to do is see it happen once. Then the next deal I did, I said, wait a minute, Mr. Lender, I need your help with this. So we got a loan in place on the second deal to help me renovate the apartments so that I could implement my business plan, right? So as you can see, that I learned that lesson and then applied it to other deals. So that's hopefully an interesting story, but that's how I got into the value add side of the real estate business, which has proven to be extremely lucrative.
I'm just curious, my brain was just telling me to ask you this question. What was the number of units on the second deal? You didn't have to tell us the story, just what was the unit count?
22.
Okay.
24, I think it was
24.
24.
Okay, so you kind of stayed in the same ballpark. Okay.
Yeah, it was in the same neighborhood. And then after that, I bought another 22 units in the similar neighborhood because I got to understand the neighborhood, right? And that's one of the lessons that I always tell people. You got to really understand that little neighborhood, not the city. You got to understand the street and the block that you're on so that you understand what should happen and what could happen.
So let me ask you this. You did all this projects. Obviously, you scaled your business. You managed, you said, thousands and thousands of units as well. And then you got to this point where you're kind of pulling funds together, in a blind pool, and then trying to, basically get that capital and deploy that capital. So can you just kind of talk to us a little bit more? I know this is a little bit more sophisticated strategy in terms of how to raise funds, but just kind of talk to us how that process works. And just kind of give us some ideas of how you're going to deploy that capital.
Sure. So I'll tell you how most people get into this, and it's very similar to how we did. So we started off with syndications, right? So with a syndication, I go find the property, I convince the seller to put it under contract with me. I give them some money, as a deposit, and then I go out and raise the money, right? So you put the deal, then you go find the money. And we had done a number of those, and the sources of those funds were really people that I knew, right? Over time, your circle of influence continues to grow because people start to know, oh, this is what he does for a living. They start to trust you. They start to see that you've done really well, and they want a piece of that. So our funding sources just generally grew over time organically. Now, when we made the move to Central Florida and Northern Florida in maybe 10 or 15 years ago, the challenge is it's ultra competitive in that market. That's very different than the Cleveland market when you're trying to buy. So we did get some deals syndicated in Central and Northern Florida. That wasn't the problem, but the problem is now it's even more competitive than it was. So now we're trying to figure out, how do we stand out from the pack, right? If there's 15 offers on a deal, well, they're all syndicators. Well, I'm just like everybody else. So I said, all right, we've got to change this. And you're going to find most of what we do is reasoned out through some necessity, right? It's usually we make changes because it makes sense to do that. So I said, all right, being at Deloitte, I was very familiar with the private equity model because I had a ton of private equity clients there. So I knew what they did. I understood how they did it. And I said, you know what, we need to implement this model in the real estate business. So we went out. Now we've got, 20 plus years of experience. Our senior management teams manage 15,000 units. We currently manage a couple thousand units throughout Central and Northern Florida. So the experience was there, and now it made sense to go out to the market and say, hey guys, I need you to invest in our blind pool fund, which just means I'm going to put the money now in front of the deal. And that takes an experienced investor to do that, or experienced sponsor to do that, like us, because now I've laid out the business plan for everybody that invested in our fund. They know we're going to do a value add. They know it's going to be in a BC class asset class. They know it's in Central and Northern Florida. They know our minimum underwriting we're shooting for is 15%. So now they're comfortable. They've seen through our track record, which we can get into later, that we've done it before many, many times. So now they say, okay, we're in. We're going to make a commitment to you. So we went out and we raised that fund, all those funds. And now when we approach the market, there's all these other syndicators, and then there's us. All that equity raised risk is off the table because we have the money already raised in the bank, Mr. Seller. And in fact, we're approaching the market right now. We're promising them that we can get closed by a certain time. So we can close quicker because we don't have to go out and raise the money. And I'm not going to call you in a month or a month and a half and say, oh, by the way, I wasn't able to raise the money. Sorry. Right. That's all gone because it's all there. It's already been done. So that's why we made the jump to the blind pool fund. because it made sense. It makes us more competitive. And thus far, it's proven to be true.
Yeah, I mean, that
Does that make
surety of
sense?
close, 100%. The surety of close is a big win for sellers. That's one of our strategies. That's how we won our last deal, because the money's in the bank. So as you said, it takes off that raising equity risk off the table. Yeah, and a lot of sellers want to close before the end of the year. I mean, as of this recording, this is October 2021. So by December, people really want to deploy that capital because they don't want to take into the next year and have to pay taxes on it. So there's a lot of variety,
Right.
a lot of reasons why people want to do that for those listening. Ken, we can keep going on and on, but we're definitely dwelling into the quick rounds. These are going to be quick questions, quick answers. You ready, sir?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. First question. What makes you, Ken, unique? What is that differentiating factor that separates you from the next guy or the next girl? You can use your company as well yourself.
Yeah, probably my my drive and my constant thirst for learning and expanding my knowledge.
I see you've got some books behind you there. What was the last book that you read, and what was the one thing that you picked out from that book?
Yeah, probably, and this kind of supported what I already knew. Grant Cardone's 10X book. I don't remember the exact title, but all that matters is it's 10X, right? And that's how we approach everything. You know, if you need to kill an ant, don't use your finger, use a sledgehammer, right? Go after it full speed and make sure you're going to be successful. So that's probably the biggest impact. And I'm reading constantly, so I could name off 10 books, but you said I should be quick. So that's quick.
Final question. You're busy a lot, raising funds, managing your assets. What do you do for fun?
What do I do I spend time with my family. My kids are awesome. My family's awesome. At this point in my life, it's funny, as life has going full circle, you realize that it is all about your kids and your family, and that's what's really important. And so, and quite honestly, growing what we're doing, I actually really enjoy doing it. It is fun. I don't feel like it's work.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny you said that. I'm in my 30s. I've got two young girls, and I'm trying to do like what you said is what I'm trying to do now. Like, I live millions. I was talking to someone the other day. I feel like I'm leaving millions on the table to go spend time with my kids. But those are millions on the table I don't mind living, because I want to just relish that time, because I'm never going to see them at 1 or 2 years old again, right? So I just want to relish that time as much as possible. So I can relate.
You're absolutely doing the right thing. You do not get that time back. I would give anything to do it all over again. Not that I missed time. I had a lot of time with my kids, but that's what it's about, right? Yeah. They're not going to talk about the money. They're going to talk about what they remember being with dad when we did this and this and this and this and this, and that's what they'll remember.
Exactly. So for anyone listening and going, wow, I really like this, Ken guy, and they want to get connected with you, where can people go to find out more about you, learn about what you're doing?
Sure. So remember, I talked earlier about the book.
Oh yes,
that I wrote.
Book. Let's not forget the book.
Yeah. So it's the easiest way to get to me. The name of the book is Multifamily Real Estate is a Total Game Changer, and it's going to do two things. It's going to, one, answer that question that you asked me, and that is, how do you figure out how this is going to fit into your life? Every single person knows you can make a ton of money in real estate. They're just trying to figure out, how does that fit for them? So the first part of the book, I walk them through that process. Then the second part of the book, I make the assumption that most people should be passive investors. They should invest with syndicators like you and fund sponsors like me, because they've got really good day jobs, right? I don't recommend oral surgeons and orthopedic surgeons to quit their day job to go into real estate, right? They got pretty good day jobs. Invest with guys like us, but now you've got to figure out, how do you pick the right guy or gal to invest with? So I go through the process of vetting sponsors, and I talk a lot about how the business works. So that's critical. If you understand how an industry works, you kind of understand what motivates people to do what they do. And if you're vetting those sponsors, it helps you get a better clue on the questions you should ask. So to get the book, just go to kripartners.com/ebook. So it's kripartners.com/ebook. Download the ebook, and then you're kind of in my system. If you want to reach out to me directly, I'd love to hear from you. It's kgee@kripartners.com.
Fantastic, Ken. You're an absolute legend. Appreciate you, sir. Thank you.